Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present to you the deforestation regulation, what EuroCommerce is doing, and also the state of play, because you couldn't have scheduled your own conference better, because just yesterday we got new information. So be sure that I will try to go into this a little bit later, but let me start with what we are. EuroCommerce is the European Business Association representing retailers and wholesalers at European level, and we bring together both retailers and wholesalers, both national associations. We have 28 national association members, and also big leading companies like Jerónimo Martins that are also members of us. And we really represent all kind of products. So basically every kind of product you can imagine, one of our members will be selling it. And I think the main ones to mention is, of course, food, do-it-yourself, textiles, electronics, and a lot of them are impacted by the deforestation regulation. So we really have a broad EU-wide network where we bring our members together and also facilitate that our members can exchange with each other, because even for a big company like you, it's interesting to engage with your peers and to exchange the information that's out there. So when it comes to the EU deforestation regulation, there was actually a predecessor. Before the EUDR, there was the so-called EU timber regulation that only looked at timber. And what the European Union did after a few years, the European Commission, they looked at how did it actually work out, did it have the impact, and when they did the so-called fitness check and looked what was the outcome, they came to the conclusion, actually it didn't help enough. We have heard it many times today, deforestation, forest degradation is still a problem that's ongoing, and therefore they said, okay, we need to do something and need to change the legislation, also because they found out that it's actually, even in Europe, not applied in the same way. There are differences between the member states, and importantly also they heard from the operators, from the companies, that they have problems getting information in the supply chain, so it was not actually that easy to apply the legislation and to make sure that we have no deforestation in the supply chains. So therefore the next big step was then in 2019 with the EU Green Deal. It was already mentioned today in the opening speech. You might remember there was the previous commission, it was just starting, it was this big push for green transition, for sustainability, so the back then new European Commission came up with this new so-called EU Green Deal that, among others, also included some measures to fight deforestation and to support deforestation-free supply chains. Why is this really important? Because deforestation and forest degradation are estimated to contribute around 11% to global greenhouse gas emissions, so there is a huge impact on the climate, and fighting deforestation is an important emission source that's helped there. So the new Commission really wanted to be quite ambitious, so then after some preparation time, in November 2021, they came up with this first proposal for EU deforestation regulation in order to regulate this. And this is a little bit the background you need to have in mind. But of course, at the same time, we had now a very groundbreaking proposal, because while the EU timber regulation only applied to timber, we now had a big proposal that is really breaking new ground. Why? Because it really forbids that products are placed on the market or exported outside of the EU that are contributing to deforestation. It's no longer only about timber, it's also about soy, about palm oil, about cattle, about coffee, coca, and rubber. It introduces a new IT system, an information system, an electronic system. It requires companies to submit electronic due diligence statements. And it also includes a so-called benchmarking system of all countries in the world according to their risk levels for deforestation. And importantly, it introduces also the so-called cut-off date to make sure that all land areas that were turned, for example, into agricultural land after December 2022 are not used anymore, in order to don't give an incentive that there are new forests cut down to create new land. So really, this was this big environmental and climate push for the European Commission. But at the same time, you also remember we had the COVID pandemic. And this made the negotiations very complicated, because it was not as easy as before to engage with the members of the European Parliament, with the Commission, also with the member states, and during this very difficult negotiations about this very ambitious proposal, we unfortunately ended up with some very complex rules that, from our point of view, do not really reflect really the reality of businesses and the reality of supply chains. Also, what's important to mention is that a lot of these new systems, like the IT system, like the benchmarking system, they are really new. They need to be built from scratch, and this also contributes to the complexity. So when we started engaging then and trying to prepare, we ended up with something like this. This is a slide from the European Commission, where they said, okay, this is, for example, the EU chocolate supply chain, and you see that this is very linear. But this was the starting point where we then recognized, okay, we need to step up and we need to really explain to policymakers how our supply chain is working, because we normally say you don't have always this easy linear supply chains. Very often we speak about supplier networks, supplier clusters, and we really needed to explain there needs to be done more and how actually businesses work in practice. So how do we do this as a business association, being present in Brussels? We are very lucky as an association. We represented a very important expert group that the Commission's had. So there is a very long-standing platform on protecting forests that dealt in the past with the timber regulation, is now dealing with the EU deforestation regulation. And this really brings together the Commission, but also member states, us, other sectors, NGOs, and allowed us firstly to engage with the European Commission. Then we followed up with some really direct exchanges where we facilitated an exchange between the Commission and our members to allow our members to directly ask questions to the people who are working on it, who are preparing the IT system and other implementation measures, and importantly also to give the Commission access to businesses, because we also noticed they are very much looking for the direct exchange with people from the businesses that know how it works in reality. Then we also collected all the questions that members have and bring them together directly to the Commission, because this is also something they very much appreciate, that not everyone by themselves is going to them, but that they can get some questions in a more concise and summarized manner. And this really helps them, because in this way we were able to influence the Commission guidance that's out there, the frequently asked questions document, where there are now 4 versions of this document, because members came with more and more questions, and we could always feed this into the Commission and say, it's not enough, there are new questions, new points for clarifications, please address this, because this is very important for the businesses. Then also when it comes to the IT system, for example, we facilitated that members could attend to testing, because at the beginning only one person per organization was allowed. So then we organized some train-the-trainers meetings, where then we sent one expert there, and they then explained to all of our members, okay, that's how the IT system is looking like, this is how the Commission imagines to working, to really give members access and to help you and your experts to prepare for the new regulations. And then last but not least, also we are engaging quite publicly, because the Commission likes to do what they call public consultations, where we then answer on behalf of the sector. And we are also working together, of course, with other associations, because when you look at different supply chains, be it the forest owners, the producers, the farmers, others, they are also active, so there we also like to cooperate with other sectors. And for example, on the IT system from the very beginning, we have warned that it really needs to be properly tested, because there will be a lot of due diligence statements, and this needs to be checked on time, because we know from our experience that IT systems need to be ready. Another important point to mention is also to help us implement. It's also very important that members share their own expectations and their own lessons learned, the intelligence they get by engaging, for example, here in Portugal with your Portuguese authorities, because they are the ones that need to implement. So it's not only a top-down approach, it's also that members can bring their own questions when they say, hey, my public authority told me they want to implement it in this way. Is this also the same way in other member states? So this is also very important, that members can engage directly, and that if there are maybe diverging views among member states, that we can then follow up with the European Commission. Then when it comes to our sector, and I think Jerónimo Martins is a good example, we have our own commitments, our own strategies already, so deforestation is really a really important issue to address, and this is something that we definitely support. But it's also not always that easy to agree in a very broad sector, because we have both retailers and wholesalers, and a wholesaler dealing with timber products has a slightly different perspective as a food retailer who deals with a lot of the commodities mentioned. We have big and small companies, while our larger companies are able to invest a lot of time and resources in dealing with the preparation. We know that some SMEs definitely have problems, and the lack of resources and being overwhelmed with also a lot of other legislation that's out there. And then, of course, really the variety of products leads also to some problems, because depending on the supply chain and the commodity you're looking at, it's different. Therefore, since we started to prepare, really we had more and more questions that arose, and we tried to follow this up with the Commission, but it was not only our sector that had more and more questions. You might be aware, and we heard it also already today, there are a lot of countries, producing countries and operators both in the EU and not in the EU, that really feared that if these new rules enter into force, they might not be able anymore to supply the European market, or European producers were feared they could not serve their global market anymore. And therefore, you are hopefully aware that then last year the Commission proposed a 12-month delay, because originally the EUDR was supposed to enter into force already last year. But as the whole IT system was not running at the moment, and the benchmarking system was missing, they said, okay, we give everyone 12 more months to prepare. And already back then, first discussions started to pop up to say, maybe we need more changes for the EUDR, more simplification. There were, for example, this idea to have a zero-risk category on top of the low, medium, high risk that the benchmarking system foresees. And since then, we had a lot of discussions ongoing. And also in our sector, because I think to really summarize it, there are two big topics that are really a challenge for our sector. The first one is the complexity. You have all this traceability that you need to provide. If you are a large company, this is a challenge. In addition, for these due diligence statements, you need to have the geolocation data. So for each soybean, for each coffee bean, for each chocolate bean, you need to know from which plots of land this came on the global level. And a good example that we always use is the example of cattle, where you not only need to know where was this cow born, but also where was it fed, where was it grazing, where was it living, where was it slaughtered. And all this information you need to bring together. So you can imagine, even just for steak, this is already a lot of information, and we're selling a lot of steaks, and maybe the beef goes also into other products. So this is really not that easy for our members, and it's a huge challenge. And another big point that our members are faced with is really the duplication of obligations. Because the idea of the EUDR is that along the whole supply chain, this traceability information adds up. And as we, as a more downstream operator, of course, receive and buy a lot of products, either from the farmers or from processors in between, we receive a lot of information and are supposed to add our own information and also upload due diligence statements, even if we don't change the product, because we, for example, buy a chocolate bar and just sell it to the consumer. But even then, the Commission expects us also to upload information, which leads then to this high number of due diligence statements that they expect their IT system needs to handle. On top of this, of course, there are certain exemptions for SMEs, but still information also needs to travel along the supply chain. So we really like that we have a lot of SME suppliers also, because we want to offer our customers these products they are providing and producing. But of course, there's a problem. You also need to make sure that they are on board, and there are, especially from the SME perspective, a lot of concerns that maybe they are left out on the market, because if it's too difficult to handle with them, then maybe some companies will say, oh, I cannot deal with you because it's too complicated for regulatory reasons. And all these new things really need to be integrated into the internal processes, into your supplier relationships. So this is really a big issue. So coming from these challenges that not only our sectors have, there is a lot of political tension and uncertainty there. And basically what we see at European level, you have on the one hand some policymakers who are in favor of another delay, in favor of some simplification, who really see there needs to be something done because the rules are not fit for purpose and too complex. But we have also the other side that says, okay, there was already a 12-month delay, and that fear that the EUDR would be weakened, and this would obviously be bad because we need to do something against deforestation. So therefore, there was a lot of discussion in the last month since the European Commission announced that they are thinking about having another delay or another proposal. And just yesterday, there was a proposal. I am only able today to give you some headlines because right now my colleagues are discussing with members and making a deep dive into the new proposal. But basically, what the Commission yesterday said is that there would be another delay, but only for the SMEs, only for the small players. However, in order to also help the downstream operators, like the retailers and wholesalers, they would say that they don't need to submit another due diligence statement if the product was already placed on the market, which was one idea that we advocated for a long time, to say, why duplicate this? Why can we not do it like in other legislation? This would make life for us easier. So this would mean for a company like Jerónimo Martins, still the EUDR would apply from the end of 25, but another simplification and relief measure that is proposed is really to say, okay, but we have then a 6-month, what they call grace period, to say where there is a testing of the IT system and there will be no enforcement, no sanctions to allow everyone to get used to this, because it's not only the companies that are new and need to apply this, but also the public authorities. This is also something that we called for. We called it a learning period to say, let's get everyone together, let's test this, but don't make sure that already on the 1st or 2nd of January next year, the authorities are there and trying to give you a fine because something is not working. However, there is still some uncertainty because this is only a proposal at the moment and it still needs to be approved by the co-legislators at the European level, so the European Parliament and the Member States and the Council. But we hope it's a little bit more certainty still at the moment. And really, to end, I want to say, it's clear for us, from our perspective, that traceability is here to stay. And I think the big message is, and the proposal yesterday from the Commission shows this, that all the work you put in, all the investments you made, this is really not wasted, because traceability is important, and we see also this as a growing trend across different other pieces of legislation. When it comes to due diligence, when it comes to sustainability reporting, to digital product passports, there also transparency of supply chains will be required. So it was already mentioned, biodiversity loss, climate impact of deforestation is something that would also be important when it comes to due diligence or sustainability reporting. So really our opinion here is really these investments made will serve a purpose, and this will help you because there are regulatory challenges that you need to address. And then my last point is also to say, also on behalf of my colleagues, really a big, big thank you, because your feedback is really valuable and it really makes an impact and makes a difference, because if you engage with policymakers and if you can come with data, with good questions, with real-life examples, it's easier. And we see this in the engagement with the Commission, that they then see, okay, we are a constructive partner, we're not only there to complain, but that we have real problems, real challenges, and I think this helps us, and in the end also helps you to engage there with the policymakers. So thank you very much. We know you have a lot to do, you have a business to run, you have customers to serve, and this is an additional task for you. But when we ask for feedback, please think about this, and please help us help you, basically. Thank you very much.